Like I said, a lot of people, they're just so brainwashed from conventional dieting and stuff, and they get freaked out about food. They have like a PTSD of food portioning and all that, and they think they have to do that. And you don't. And once you get clued in with your satiety signals, it's so easy. You don't even think about it. And
It's just a good frame of reference, right? Because
yeah,
in the end, you got to serve yourself up something. How do you know to serve yourself up this much versus this much, right? So
yeah,
usually, you know, 3 to 6 ounces, 3 to 5 ounces would be pretty good. So like for a guy, right? I'm 6'2", 210 ish, right? I have bigger hands, so like I may serve a protein amount the size of my hand. So go between a palm to a fist to a full hand is usually that frame of reference. The more active you are, the more stressed you are, the more you're doing exercise, move to a protein amount the size of your full hand. The less active you are, you can go to that palm size. And if you're just starting out, like you're coming on board from being like a vegan vegetarian where there's not a lot of protein, start with a quarter palm and then kind of work your way up. And again, if you have problems with protein, it typically means you have low hydrochloric acid, low enzymes, and you have to really work with a good functional medicine person to get your HCl and enzymes up. And you may have H. pylori and SIBO and other bacterial imbalances that are impeding your digestion. So you really have to look deeper if those symptoms come up. It's not the protein, it's the fact that your digestive system is weaker and cannot tolerate the protein.
yeah, well said. A lot of people blame the meat. Oh, I feel bad when I eat meat, so I'm not going to eat it. It's like, no, that's you're supposed to be doing that. Like I had a client the other day that was in South Dakota, super strict vegan. And I'm like, okay, how dedicated are you to being vegan? Like, well, they're like, I'm totally dedicated. I'm like, okay, so if let's just role play. I was like, okay, so if there were no planes, no trains, no buses, no semi trucks, and it's the middle of February and there's a foot of snow on the ground in South Dakota, are you going to be able to stick to your diet? And the answer is no way. I'm like, well, what would you be eating? Well, the only thing that's in the landscape, animals. So
Yep.
we don't have to turn into that podcast, but I just want people to know how important these things are. They really do help stabilize blood sugar. Could you make vegetarian vegan diets work? Maybe if you try really, really hard, but that's a whole nother podcast. Let's go back to the mycotoxin piece for a minute because
Yep.
something we're seeing is something called zearalenone, which is
Yep.
a highly, highly estrogenic mycotoxin. It comes from a mold called Fusarium, which grows in water damaged buildings. Now, you will get exposed to some of this from moldy, contaminated grains, but I would say the vast majority, 90% of it, I would estimate, is probably from buildings, meaning whether your mother had mold and passed it in utero. And if you were breastfed, if you went to moldy daycare as a kid, moldy elementary, middle, high school, moldy homeschool, moldy college, moldy dorm, moldy office building. I mean, this is an epidemic problem. I see it literally every single day, all day. And zearalenone really screws up your estrogen, actually, far more than soy. It's way more estrogenic than soy. So we do talk about, the pitfalls of doing like soy protein and that kind of thing. But man, zearalenone will screw you up way more than soy protein will. Man, this is something you have to use binders to pull it out of the system. So if you're struggling with weight loss, you are having these estrogen dominant symptoms, maybe you've worked on the hormone piece, but you're still struggling. Maybe you've implemented something like calcium D-glucarate to work on that glucuronidation pathway, but you're still suffering. You may need to look into this, and we measure this via urine. So this is where, like you mentioned, a good workup comes in handy. We're going to do urine, we're going to do stool. As needed, we can look into these different body systems and find the dysfunction. But this is the real root cause functional medicine strategy to have lean muscle mass and lose body fat. And unfortunately, this is a very, very not talked about discussion. You and I talked before we hit record. There's a lot of talking heads on the internet, people that will say this study says that and this study says that, but none of them are actually doing the clinical work. And we wouldn't be able to do what we do if we didn't get results. And we get results because we're running the right labs, we're doing the right root cause strategies, which is getting these toxins out of the system. And I've seen it in children as young as 5. I've seen it in 2, 3, 4 year olds. I've seen it in my own kids. We've tested their urine and seen mycotoxins. So this is a problem that it does affect kids. Now, obesity in children, usually there is diet issues, but I have seen in some cases, I had a lady in New York, her 8-year-old was basically eating paleo, but she was obese and she had extremely high levels of zearalenone. Luckily for this little girl, we were able to do binders. She was able to swallow pills, which was great because it made it easier. And boom, this kid lost weight. She didn't change anything with diet. She just detoxed. So honestly, with so much toxin that we're up against, I would say detox support for life is really how I approach the conversation with people.
Exactly.